Welcome to the 8 p.m. Debrief Cookout with your boy AMG Dent and the BFB, the brilliant F1 Black. And listen, we got pepper on this menu. We got flavors for days. We got Jerk Mercedes strategy team. We got Jerk AlphaTauri and fraud sauce. Anything you need. But yeah, firstly, of all, I'd like to say that I'm very glad to be back for my sabbatical. As you may know, last week my cousin, Mr. Chimney, the very ominous Mr. Chimney, was on here, strutting and stuff and cooking everybody. So I'm very glad to be back to restore some normality and less violence on this podcast, of course. But yeah, it's amazing to be back. We've got a special guest for you all. They haven't tuned in just yet, so we're gonna try and freestyle it whilst we wait for them to get here. But Black man, I'm so happy to be back. After the Le Mans 24 hours, I had to pay for all of those tires that I used. So I'm finally glad that all of my charity work is done and I've finally paid off Michelin that huge debt I had for them.
Yeah, out of the Michelin factory, and it's great to have you back. It was a strange week last week. Go on, sorry.
Oh, I could imagine, man. Like, firstly of all, in relation to Michelin, they threatened to turn me into one of the Michelin men. My face is going to be all chubby. And then, Georgino is going to threaten to pull my chubby cheeks apart. So I'm very glad to hear that, the Michelin man actually had mercy on me. And then, yeah, man, I listened back to the podcast and boy, my cousin, Mr. Chimney, he don't play, man. He don't play. He's out there for anybody and everybody, So, yeah, completely different sort of energy with him, man. But I'm glad that he kept my seat warm. And, we've got a lot to talk about in this one. Like, we've got so many things to touch on, and we'll just kind of outline some of these subjects before our special guest comes in. What do we see at the weekend, man? Like, it looks like, first level, has the three-pointed star lost its sharpness in terms of Mercedes and, the diabolical kind of decision they made, which could have ultimately cost Lewis Hamilton a race win, potentially his first of the season. Then I think at some point we have to discuss Beta-Tari. We're not even calling them AlphaTauri anymore. There's nothing alpha about their energy. We just have to call them Beta-Tari from now on with their dodgy Yuki Tsunoda antics, which coincide with a certain Max Verstappen being behind the cause in his home Grand Prix. And then, Black, remember Robot Wars in this country? Well, I think there's a spin-off show, and I hear it's called Contract Wars. It's the latest installment involving Otmar Savnav and obviously as well our boy Big Daddy Shug Brown, which I think he paid some of the members of the CRB commission, the board, to free man like Piastri, or else there's gonna be some heavy repercussions they didn't really look forward to. Because somehow, although Otmar Savnav swears that Oscar Piastri had a valid contract with Alpine, somehow Big Daddy Brown worked his magic and somehow got Oscar Piastri free. So he's going to be joining McLaren in the Orange Army, the actual Orange Army, not the rats that follow Max Verstappen around. And then, man, that also leaves another kind of talking point for us as well, with two potential Frenchmen being in the same team. But I hear that they don't really like to share the same baguette when you talk about Ocon and Gasly. So that is pretty much the agenda list. But Black, whilst we're still waiting for our special guest, let's get into it, man. Mercedes, what happened?
Yeah, it's so difficult. I feel like not that F1 Twitter is life, right? Let's first of all just say it's not life or death. But I think that there are people that are Lewis fans first and foremost. That I would put myself in that bracket. But there are also quite a lot of people that are Mercedes fans, right? So they love the team, they love both drivers, and I don't know how you can support teams that is not back in when I grew up it was drivers, but it's teams now as well. They love the merch, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like there was a fault line this weekend in the Dutch Grand Prix, because honestly, like the decision coming out of that final safety car, first of all, not to pit either driver. Okay, neither driver pits, so you lost the opportunity to kind of pit, and you'll still be behind Verstappen, but you'll have fresh rubber. Then the safety car peels through the pit lane, and if you watch the onboards, you can hear George sort of asking 3 times, the team saying, no, 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 stay on the mediums. And then all of a sudden, pit, yeah, we'll change your tires. So instead of Lewis Hamilton having, let's say, 5, 10, 15% chance to win, it's down to 0, because as you know that he's not going to get those medium tires warmed up, and without someone in between him and Verstappen, he's easy meat, and sadly, that's what we saw. So personally, do I blame Russell for being selfish? Probably not. Each sports person wants to win. That's absolutely understandable. But I blame the team, for not thinking about the team game, when, those of us that have followed Lewis at Mercedes have seen the team game being used as an excuse every single time. And then also, secondly, Mercedes not communicating that to Bono, who seemed not to know that George was going to come in. And then Lewis was easy picking. So I don't know what you think, Denz. It feels like this Mr. Chimney might be sort of smashing his headset wherever he is in the world, because this is the sort of thing that would make him and the same with me irate. What do you think about it, Denz? Do you blame Mercedes for what they did? Do you think Hamilton had a chance to win there that was thrown away?
Well, Black, I mean, I don't get on with my American counterpart often, but he told you guys, he did tell you guys that Mercedes, they were going into uncharted territory for a team of their stature. They were going into the fraud watch waters, those muddy, dark waters. And you see now, they're absolutely on the periphery of that, because that performance and how they reacted to that situation was nothing short of a disastrous monstrosity. Because I think what we have to bear in mind, and I think you nailed it perfectly, F1 Black, so I'm gonna try and kind of summarize it as well, is that this was Lewis's best opportunity this season to win a race. When you think about it, that Mercedes, yes, in qualifying, we know that the car has been a bit harem-scarum, but actually on high downforce circuits, of which Zandvoort is, the car seemed to be in a much more happier place. And then, they were leading the practice sessions, so we had that hope there too. Only for Sergio Spin Perez, or the spinotter, not the pinata, the spinotter, to go and spin on his final run in Q3 and to rob Lewis. Again, Red Bull's robbing Lewis Hamilton of opportunities, something that sounds quite familiar. But anyway, we'll leave that in the past. Lewis doesn't get to set his best lap of qualifying because of Perez spinning. So we had that go against us. Then obviously as well, then we had some other shady underhanded tactics from the Betatari guys, which we definitely need to discuss later on in this episode. So don't worry, viewers and listeners, we will cover that. And then even if you survive all of that, Black, then all Mercedes had to do was stick to their guns, or if you're going to take the risk, roll the dice on both cars. Because, one of the biggest complaints, and it goes to show that Mercedes don't learn, from their mistakes. We saw in Silverstone a similar situation where Lewis struggled to kind of like challenge the rest of the cars around him, because the W13 inherently struggles with tire warm-up on safety car restarts on harder compound tires. If that's the hard compound, which I call the tombstones, or the mediums, it struggles on that compound of tire. So to me, Black, and for most people online, Mercedes had two options. They could either leave things as they were, which was going to give, like you said, Lewis some chance to win the Grand Prix, because ultimately what they wanted to do was create the path of most resistance for Max to get to Lewis. And by having Russell there, didn't matter if, like, basically Max is going to overtake Russell into turn one, or if, well, in the benefit of Lewis, they were going to scrabble for a couple of corners. That buffer alone might have given Lewis that advantage to build a gap and to get away. We know that the Red Bull has extremely high top speed. So basically, for them to pit George and not Lewis is a huge howler, because then, as we all saw and we witnessed, it left Lewis like a sitting duck. And it's not the first time, and it's not the second time. And, bear in mind, Lewis is probably one of the most positive people in the world, next to me, I would say. And for him to kind of have that outburst on the radio tells you he had enough. He just had enough. And after he basically righted every single wrong that was done against him, still the team couldn't put him in a position to win the race. And what Mercedes ultimately ended up with was essentially a P2 and a P4, when potentially they could have ended up with either a W and a podium, a P2 or a P3, or a P2 and a P4, but and actually trying to go for the race win. By boxing Norris, by boxing Russell for the soft season, yeah, good for him. He's able to get the tires he wanted. But him being behind Max, he never stood a chance of getting that race win. So ultimately, I can agree and I empathize with, a lot of the fans out there that are more Lewis than Mercedes fans that feel, rightfully so, that another race win opportunity was taken from Lewis. And the issue is, Blag, is that when are we next going to get opportunity? We know that this car struggles at a lot of circuits. It's got a diva-like characteristic, even though it's not Beyonce. And more to the point, if the car is going to behave the way it did in Spa at Monza, which is another low downforce circuit, then I'm going to say one of my favorite catchphrases: "Lot of mercy." We're in big trouble. We're in huge trouble. But just before we move off this topic, Black Russell, Mr. Sadi, Mr. You know what I call him? PR. It's not GR63, it's PR63. Because this guy, he always has something to say, And like for a while, I've just been kind of just leaving him. But he said something, Black, that kind of triggered me. I can't lie. He said something, and in the post-race interviews, he said something along the lines of, "Oh, it's great for the drivers to be at Zandvoort, and it's amazing experience to be at Zandvoort," which had me kind of rolling my eyes when
Step one, red
the
flag.
orange
Step one. Yeah, red
exactly,
flag.
when the rats were only just dashing pyrotechnics on the circuit, which could have seriously injured somebody, if it had hit them at speed. A, then B, he was basically just saying, it was a great decision from the team. But then how can you say that was the best decision for the team when the team didn't optimize the results for both cars? And if I understand correctly, a team doesn't just consist of one driver, it consists of two drivers. So I didn't kind of take to his response or his celebrations kindly. You can't berate a guy for making his own decisions, and actually him making the call to jump on the soft tires highlights Mercedes' reluctance and maybe the complacency to get with the times and to stop sleeping on the job like Snoopy. But at the same time as well, I think he could have been a bit more candid about it, because a guy basically jeopardized Mercedes' chance of getting a race win only to finish P2, which to me is nothing to really write home about, because we done had P2s with Lewis already, so that's nothing major. The only kind of thing, before I hand it back to you, Black, the only thing I'll give George is maybe, and I'm just going to put this out there with my tinfoil hat, since there's a lot of people that think us Mercedes fans wear tinfoil conspiracy hats, is maybe George just said, nah, I'm not going to be a second fiddle to Lewis. I'm my own man, firstly of all. And secondly of all, I think that what George did was retribution for what happened on the first lap. Because the thing I've seen people not really mention is on that race start, Lewis gets a semi-decent start, but it's not amazing. He has to come across the circuit to cut Perez, basically. And in doing so, he was on the inside of the corner and then almost had a really big oversteery moment. He caught very skillfully to avoid hitting Sainz. I think he did tap Sainz, gave him a little, good luck strategy tap because Ferrari needed. But either way, he taps Sainz on the side pod. I don't know if you realize that George also, because of Lewis having that kind of moment of oversteering to the first corner, had to back out, and then he got swamped and lost positions to the likes of Norris and all the cars that are in and around P7, P6, P8. So I don't know if George's retaliation was not only him doing what was best for him, but also maybe some bitterness, maybe some kind of salt for basically losing out at the start because of the way Lewis had positioned his car going into the first corner. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with you that when he was saying it was a good team result or whatever it was at the end, like I was like, what? So basically, it was going to be guaranteed second or fourth, unless you stuck to the plan, and then it could have been first and third or first and whatever. You just didn't want to be third or fourth, so you wanted second, and yeah, okay, you're delighted because it's your best ever result in Formula One. We don't count the third in Belgium last year, but you got a podium this season, so congrats. But yeah, you can see that he's putting himself above the team, and Sky were very sort of praising of him for that, and so a lot of people on F1 Twitter. on a kind of human level, I get it, completely get it. It's the team's responsibility for to manage the strategies. Let's put it this way: I wouldn't sort of cook Russell this week, but if Mercedes are on fraud watch, then maybe George is on snake watch, and we just got to see how it goes, right? The thing relating to George that is going to upset me, okay, is as we get closer to the end of the season and we've only got 7 races left, George is 30 points ahead of Lewis, right? So it's a bit like one of those Jenson Button seasons where Jenson outscored Lewis, who had like a whole bunch of reliability issues, including being driven into the wall by Button in Canada.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't forget, but yeah, like they're gonna Russell, the rookie, came into a Mercedes and outpointed Lewis. That I just know they're gonna do that. I just know they're gonna do that. So, from that kind of defensive position, I just really can't have these results keep going against Lewis, right? Here's something with between 24 and 48 hours of hindsight. I'll tell you what Red Bull would have done in the same situation, okay? And it's kind of what Bottas did last year at Jeddah, right? I would have pitted Lewis and not George. I would have said to George, because he was ahead of Max on the road, recalling that in the safety car, I would have said, just back up, do your 10 car lengths and a little bit more, and let Lewis get into the box. Imagine this: Lewis gets in, gets some softs, gets out, and it won't be an unsafe release because George is the car behind, and George kind of like allows him to come through. Done, and in the pit lane where they're limited to 60 kph, you only need a couple of seconds gap to really do that. So Red Bull 100% would have done that. I'm not praising Red Bull. I'm just saying that when it comes to like basically winning at any cost, I don't think that would have been too bad a thing to do. And if Mercedes was switched on, then they would have done it. So yeah, I don't know where we're going to get the win. You've got Italy, then you've got Singapore. The Mercedes historically is bad at Singapore, but high downforce, high temperatures might work. Japan, I can't see it. Kota, I can't see it. Mexico, we never do
Hell
well.
no.
The engine's like smoked 40 Marlboro and just can't breathe up there. Sao
The altitude.
Paulo, yeah. I mean, we're hearing just tonight, and it might be confirmed by the time this goes out, that Lewis is going to start from the back in Monza anyway with a fresh engine. So, yeah. To close this point from my perspective, this was Lewis's best chance of the season to win. It was for me up there with Silverstone was a great chance if that safety car hadn't come out. And I think we're going to get onto the topic. For me, the Mercedes and George thing is an irritation. It should have been executed better, but the real main course of this cookout is what Beta Tauri did. So I don't know if you want to describe what happened, but literally it was like you could put comedy, you could put clown music.
Benny Hill.
What they did.
Is that Benny Hill music? Georgie, you gotta put that in as well, That was the best impression. But yeah, you know what? We might as well. I was gonna say something about the whole George and Lewis thing too, but I'll come back to it. But yeah, just jerk Beta Tari in fraud sauce. That's what we got to serve you guys today, because Blag, I'd like, you couldn't make it up, bro. So Yuki Tsunoda came into the pits, right? Then he left the pits and he parked on like basically the apex of the flipping banked corner going into turn 3. He says, my wheel is loose, and then on the radio, like, shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up. Like, it's not the wheel, the shush, the shush, the shush. Like at least when like Fernando Alonso had like the loose wheel like in Austria, he at least tried to make up some other excuse that actually sounded palatable. But like Yuki Tsunoda absolutely baited them out, right? So they say to him, no, it's not a loose wheel, not just come into the pits so we can have a look. So he comes into the pits, right? And for a team that has a loose wheel, all I see is like half the AlphaTauri mechanics inside Yuki's cockpit. And I get that he's a small guy, yeah, and there's like lots of space inside there. It's probably enough space for like an average family in a living room. But god damn, I'd never seen so many mechanics around one driver before. So I was like, okay. So firstly of all, there was a wheel loose. Now they're playing around with my guy's seatbelt like it's a safety issue, like the belts come loose. So okay, this is already looking a bit kind of like funky to me. Then they send my guy out again. Bear in mind, they now send him out on used soft tires, which again was just completely what are you doing? Like half of the race is still left to go. Why? Then my guy comes on the radio and says, "Yeah, there's something wrong with the diff." Now, for those who don't know, I mean, this would probably be the perfect thing to. This would be a perfect alley oop for our guys, at the Tech Talk pod or the Tech Heads podcast. Shout out to them. But in my best kind of like simulation kind of explanation, the diff is basically what rotates the rear wheels when you're taking the torque and power from the gearbox into the rear tires, because of course Formula One cars are rear wheel drive. So if a diff breaks, it can fundamentally impact the way a car handles or performs. It's not really out of the question, but to go from having a loose wheel to messing around with the seatbelt, then to having a broken diff. Bear in mind, the diff has sensors. So it's not something that, the team would be completely blinded to. They can see that on the telemetry. For Yuki to then come out on the radio and say that, and then the team to tell him, go out and then park in a safe place, when they could have just retired the car in the box alone, is shouting big fraud watch to me. It's shouting HSBC ringing you at 1 o'clock in the morning because somebody's stolen your card and spending it on like margaritas in your local pub. That's the kind of level of fraudulence I'm seeing here. And then for my guy, he didn't even make no conscious effort to park the car where the car could like literally be pulled back by a couple of marshals in a couple of seconds. My guy does the hottest move, and like you couldn't make this up. My guy parks the car like like he's Mr. Bean. Like it was almost comedy gold to see how he parked the car and like actually the positioning of it. So forgive me, like people, and neutralists that think that I'm wearing my Mercedes tinfoiled hat, because I know you guys love to say that, but something smells really fishy to me, and it's not the sushi tower. That I can definitely tell you. Like, your thoughts?
Yeah, and it's not Fernando Alonso with all his saltfish patties stuffed in the race suit. Like, tell me about it. Who
The
was
saltfish awards, man.
strangely quiet. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, right? This is the thing. The team weren't sort of in a hurry to tell him to get back to the pits immediately, right? So he obviously did a pit stop. He came out, thought the wheel was loose. He stopped, and then it seemed like there was a bit of a pause. If this was like a cartoon or an animation, they'd be looking around like safety car, any safety car, VSC. It really genuinely looked like back in the day, right? Maybe it was uni or something like that. Me and my mate, like this is how tech has advanced. We play Gran Turismo. I think it was Gran Turismo 3, and we thought the graphics were insane. So we'd be driving on this little course, and then we'd be messing around, like going the wrong way, parking it, like whatever, halfway across the track, and waiting for people to hit us. Then we'd watch the replay and just start laughing, like it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, whatever. We were that cool. Anyway, like that's what it looked like. But we were watching it live on TV. He sort of like stopped, like, safety car, just at the right moment. And then, oh no, there's no safety car. Then he just suddenly starts driving off. It just did not look, in years and years, a couple of decades watching Formula One, I've never seen anything like it. And honestly, like, let's just take if there's no malice in this and it was just incompetence. So if AlphaTauri got him back to the pits, recovered the car, but then I heard there was a radio that as he was coming out, they said, right, make sure you get out of the pit lane and then stop the car. Well, they've sent a car that was unsafe into the race. So they should, there should be a serious penalty. It shouldn't just be a fine. It should be some sort of ban or something serious, because that's even if you didn't mean to achieve what you did, that's a big problem. Now, why they wouldn't want to stop in the pit lane and perhaps close the pit lane and prevent their sister team lead driver from I don't know, pitting at an opportune moment, I don't know. I don't want to necessarily cast aspersions on BetaTauri, but the whole thing is completely fishy, as you say. And even if they did it with all the best will in the world, it was incompetence. It was jeopardizing the race. And yeah, there should be serious consequences. Will there be? I don't know. Rules are rules, but we'll see. I doubt it. I'm honestly, like, the late safety car and Mercedes and George Russell has sort of overshadowed what was probably the most suspect thing to happen in a race since, I don't know, Singapore 2009. Honestly, and Singapore 2009, nobody believed that was, cheating until Nelson Piquet Jr. actually came out and admitted it, and then he got blackballed from the sport. No one ever hired him again. That's odd, right? You think if a guy in a sport that was virtuous, a guy would be rewarded from being honest, but no. As soon as he revealed that something dodgy happened, I don't know. I just looked at that post-race interview with Yuki, and he looked incredibly sheepish. Maybe that's his demeanor. Maybe he's introverted, but I don't know, Dens. So what? Like, let me ask you a question that I don't expect that we're going to get what we want, but do you think that AlphaTauri are going to face any sort of penalty for what they did? Is anything going to happen for them in the next race?
Man, F1 Black, all I have to do is show you a picture of Mohammed Ben Sulayem hugging Max Verstappen to give you your answer to that, bro. Hell no, they ain't getting no penalties for that, bro. This is part of the This is part of the clown show we call Formula One at the moment. You'd get better racing, as we've told people for like the millionth time on this podcast, either from IndyCar, from NASCAR, from like dirt bike racing, from like kids on mopeds, from me playing Lego races, from me getting my ass beat on a date playing F1 races. Like, it doesn't matter. You'd get better authentic racing anywhere else but Formula One, man. This joke of a show is crazy at times, just to see what happens. And like you said, you know what? I could rein it in and say maybe genuinely it's not as sus as we think it looks. But even still, like you said, rightfully so as well, Black. There has to be some repercussion for that, because how can my guy just drive out of the pits and then part on the apex of a banked corner, like the race, like if it was Skate Electrics, like if his batteries just died on the track or something? My guy was just chilling on like, I wonder if he was just chilling there watching like the orange flares, just taking in the vibes or something, or you wanted to hear his favorite DJ bang out some, it was just one of them moments you just pull over like a rat on the highway. You just take in the scenery. Like I just don't know, Black, honestly. So yes, I 110% think there should be some formal investigation and some sort of like penalty enforced. Do I believe the FIA would do it? I think we have more chance of like maybe, I don't know, like maybe Ayrton Senna, coming back and somehow like slapping Max Verstappen in the face when he's on the podium. There's more chance of that happening than I think there is ever of the FIA doing what's actually just for the. I think the most justified thing they did the entire weekend, like, was give Seville a 5-second penalty for basically impeding Lewis on his charge to close down Max on the hard tire. That's practically it. There's nothing else I actually think they got right this weekend, which says it all.
I mean, that what Vettel did, maybe it was unfortunate, but it just seemed like if you were going out of your way to block someone, you would struggle to do as good a job as Sebastian Vettel did. And yeah, losing 4 seconds, 3 seconds. Thankfully, Lewis stayed in the pit window, or sorry, the green flag pit window. But it was a complete joke, and yeah, rightly so, a penalty for Vettel. And maybe he's just sort of having a laugh. Him and Ricciardo are probably just sort of seeing out the rest of the season. I'm just going to slide the car a bit. I'm not going to be in the car as fast as this ever again. Why not? Let's have a laugh. But yeah, this Beta Tauri situation, it does raise for me the point. It's really ironic that on the one hand, Formula One saying, Stefano Domenicali saying, "Oh, do you need more teams in Formula One?" No, not at all. So Andretti can't come in. Andretti to come in. Oh, but can Red Bull own another team? Yeah, fine. Just why not? Just let them keep it. I just think the whole thing doesn't feel right to me. Andretti would be a fresh ownership, and having a junior team in the sport just feels like you're opening the door for undue influence. And back in the day, a long time ago, Ferrari used to have a really strong relationship with Sauber, where I don't know if it was Felipe Massa in the Sauber back then. You'd sort of hear the commentary on ITV back in the day say, "Oh, Ferrari have gone to have a word with Sauber to make sure the lap car gets out of the way." And even then, you'd be like, maybe that's not quite right, but lap cars should move out of the way. Now
Yeah,
we're
it's
getting,
reasonable.
yeah, now
Now
we're
it's
getting to
just
the
like a different
stage.
level. Mhm.
Exactly. Like Tsunoda. The whole weekend is a weird one. Perez basically guaranteeing his teammate pole by going off when Lewis was 0.07 ahead. Lewis even starting third or second is closer to being an odds-on favorite to win the race based on the race pace we have. And then in the race, yeah, the antics of AlphaTauri at best, they should have a severe penalty, possibly some sort of, I don't know. They're not going to do a race ban, are they? Because that's just not how Formula One works. But I'd put it out there. Gosh, AlphaTauri sufficiently cooked to your liking, sir? Sufficiently grilled?
Man, medium rare, or should I say medium soft? Because how they put Yuki on like used soft tires after it just doesn't make sense to me. Like honestly, we could actually chat about it all day. Like this was like a series of just like incoherent decisions and radio chatter and just noise. And it's all good to know they're doing these things if it has an ulterior motive, but I think he's one that needs to watch his back too, because I hear that there's a young American dog looking to get into F1. For once, I actually hope Dominicali breaks the rules and makes this allowance, since they break rules anyway, and allows a young Colton Herta to make his debut into Formula One. Because if that's the case, Yuki's in for a really, 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 really tough ride. And I don't think his Honda connections are going to save him either. I think if, for whatever reason, Colton Herta makes it into F1 next season and he absolutely peppers Yuki Tsunoda, he's finished. Absolutely done, like a medium rare steak.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about that is that assumes that they would line up with Tsunoda and Herta. And with the greatest respect to both drivers, with a cost cap, that's going to be a lot of crash damage. And Red Bull loves apparently dipping into the AlphaTauri cost cap. We can neither confirm nor deny, but
allegedly.
Sorry,
Before Uncle Helmet, sends his SS troopers to find us.
Someone, I'm attributing that to someone else. Sources close to Red Bull thinking believe that they might enjoy some of the salary cap, or sorry, the cost cap of AlphaTauri. So if you bring in Herta, who is, oh my God, unbelievably naturally quick, exciting driver, probably the American, I say this with a heavy love, Alexander Rossi, but probably Colton Herta is the American that will capture the attention of the fans that Formula One wants. He's the guy that could do that for F1 and come into the sport. But I just can't see why you would then have Tsunoda, who for me still doesn't feel the finished article alongside that. So I mean, if you're Tsunoda, you've got to watch out, because if you bring in Herta, maybe this is it for him. I don't know. Has he got an extension into next year? Who knows? Maybe this is him, again, allegedly, confirming his seat for next year by being a good boy. Who knows? And that's me joking, of course, for those legal beagles listening in. Gosh. So tell me, speaking of contracts, and there's a connection here, right? Because Colton Herta was testing a certain team's 1-year-old Formula One car not that long ago. But speaking of contracts, we had resolution at the beginning of the race weekend on whether or not Alpine had a claim to their former junior driver, Oscar Piastri. And it turns out they didn't. I'd hate to be in Alpine's legal department, whoever drafted that contract or failed to get the signature. But there we are. So shortly thereafter, there was a short video with both McLaren and, of course, their new driver, Oscar Piastri, announcing that he would line up for the team in 2023. I think, what's his race number? It's a weird one. Is it like 89 or something like that?
88 or 89, man. Yeah, I've never seen like a race number in the 80s except from Kubica's. So yeah, very bizarre.
It's trying to be different. So Oscar Piastri confirmed to be lining up alongside Lando Norris 2023. So that's another seat gone. But tell me about this, Mr. Dens. How do you, You may or may not have a little bit of a legal background. How could Alpine have gotten this so wrong? And how do you feel if you're in that Alpine team? If you're Otmar Safnauer, Laurent Rossi, I think he's the sort of sporting director. Where do you go from here? And how the hell could this have happened to them?
Yeah, well, thank you, Blag. And actually, yeah, I mean, we see many facets of AMG Dens, but the legal side rarely comes out. So I'm glad to kind of bring this element to the podcast. But yeah, I mean, in relation to this, obviously, what I can tell our listeners is that the Contract Recognition Board, they're an independent body, so they have nothing whatsoever to do with the FIA. And actually, this is a board or an organization that's been around for quite some time. So even back in the Nicky Lauda days and so forth as well, they were dealing with basically employee rights matters to do with drivers being paid fairly and getting paid when they should, etc., etc. So it's a very independent body, and essentially what Otmar Savna was saying was that Alpine had a valid contract for their boy, or used to be their boy, Oscar Piastri, to drive for them in 2023. And from a legal background, for the CRB, the Contract Recognition Board, to come to this conclusion, there's either two sides to this. Either one, Alpine didn't have a valid contract for Oscar Piastri the way Otmar Savnauer did. And I think we need to actually touch on, who gets the baguette for this too. Is it, Otmar that should take the stick since he's the mouthpiece of the company? Or, because to be fair, this is something that would have been agreed. Bear in mind, people need to remember Otmar joined the team in like February. So all of these contracts, negotiations, and things that are happening behind the scene supersede when Otmar actually joined the team as team principal. People also need to remember that. So either, as I was saying, there was no valid contract to begin with, and it's all just waffle and lies, or Piastri has some really goddamn lawyers, and Mark Webber and McLaren as well managed to find a legal loophole in the contract, which could potentially be the case, being that Oscar Piastri's legal position was a very bizarre one in a sense that he was a Alpine Academy driver. He did everything they'd asked him to do in terms of winning all the junior categories. He honored his side of the bargaining chip. There was no seat for him at the beginning of 2022, considering they took Fernando Alonso back. So they had him just in the wings, and they basically had to kind of go back into their terms and make Oscar a half-hearted promise in the sense that providing that they were going to be able to successfully retain Fernando Alonso's services for 2023, that they would try and find them some sort of seat for 2023 as well. Obviously, it wasn't going to be at Alpine. The very, very likely case it would have been Williams. But the mere fact that obviously Albon had been announced before the Ricardo thing had been announced says to me that even in itself probably wasn't worth the paper it was written on. So for that reason alone, obviously, the legal ramifications of that means that Oscar is not legally obliged to honor Alpine in that sense, one. And two, I think even if you take the legal aspects out of it, Blag, I think obviously you've got Piastri, which is a young man. He's an exceptional young driver. This isn't just like, a driver that's been promoted because of money. He's not a paid driver. He's none of. This is a driver that's almost Lewis Hamilton-esque. I say that very, very carefully for teammate H. Rosmi, in terms of he's had a very declarated junior Formula career. So he's not the sort of prospect that you can have just marinating on the bench as Alpine wanted to, just because they couldn't make their mind up as to whether or not they still have a sentimental love letter going on with Fernando Alonso dating back to 2005. You cannot do that with a driver like Oscar Piastri. So even in that interest, I don't think the Contract Recognition Board are going to look at a young driver like Piastri and watch him rot or kind of like suffer like other junior drivers have, such as Nick de Vries, when there's so much potential and there's a team that's willing, to give him a drive in a much better environment, aka McLaren. So that's definitely my 2 pence on that. But there's so many facets to kind of rip into that as well, Black. So the next thing I gotta ask you, I'm gonna throw it back into your court. Who has to hold the L for this? Who has to hold the moldy baguette? Because is it Otmar Savnawa for running his mouth, and every single opportunity saying that, basically Piastri's been unfaithful to Alpine, he's been disingenuous, he's not carried himself in a way that he should? Or do you have to actually give the L to Alpine just as an organization and maybe Lawrence, wherever his name is? I probably should have researched his name, but we don't care.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is it him and the senior people at Alpine that should have had? Bear in mind the way how I see it, like, is that Otmar Savnawa is kind of like the Ten Hag. He's the manager that's just got the players on the field.
Mm.
But ultimately, within Alpine, Lawrence is kind of like the managing director of football. He's the one that does kind of the major kind of things with people's contracts, the kind of moving abouts of people, and basically just like the marketing and the direction of the company. So, who has to take the L for it, in your opinion?
Yeah, and that's the thing about corporate culture, right? There's two facts. Whose fault was it, but who gets the blame, right? So I strongly suspect it wasn't Otmar Safnauer's fault, but he is responsible for the results, at the track. And when they don't have Alonso and when they don't have Piastri, and now they're looking for a driver, they're gonna suffer presumably. I agree. I don't think Piastri. Odds are Piastri is not going to be another Lewis Hamilton because there is no other Lewis Hamilton yet. 7
True.
championships, 104 wins, etc. He is a sort of phenomenon. But Piastri has won Formula Renault, Formula 3, Formula 2, back to back to back. Why wouldn't you expect him to be at least a race winner? Unlike the other driver, the number 4 car. So, yeah.
Salt.
Salt. So yeah, I honestly, they've made a huge cock up. I don't think it was Safnauer's fault, but he's going to be judged on those results, and he's not going to have either that world champion who could perhaps develop the car, or that that guy that looks like he could be a generational talent. So he will then lose out because of incompetence elsewhere. And I suspect, give it a year or two, Otmar might not be there, and he'll, you've seen Renault fire Cyril, they've fired all sorts of people, they've quit
I
the
can't
sport,
believe
they've
it,
come
like.
back. Yeah.
I can't believe it. They did my boy Alan Prost dirty as well, which is also why I kind of don't feel sorry for them. They disrespected the
Exactly.
professor. But please go
Exactly.
on.
No, exactly. They're not shy about firing people. It seems like the contract department is a bit shy, but the firing people bit is not shy at all. So yeah, the problem for Safnauer is, okay, maybe we'll get Gasly in. Ocon was quite clear he wanted Mick Schumacher. I mean, that for me is the kiss of death on Mick Schumacher's career, because when would a driver ever say they want a tough teammate? Like, never. Maybe Lewis is the only guy that says that. But yeah, I know I'd love Mick. Yeah, please bring Mick. That suggests that sadly nobody rates him on the grid. If they bring Gasly in, that could upset the team. But equally, is Gasly? What's his upside? How quick is he really going to be? He's having quite a tricky season in the Beta Tauri this year. So yeah, to answer your question, I think the L will be held by Otmar Safnauer, whether it's his fault or not. Let me ask a question to you. So Big Daddy Brown got what he wanted. He's got Oscar Piastri in the team starting next season. Lando Norris up alongside him. Do you think that who's going to come out on top? Lando's been in the team 4 years, 5 years plus junior career. Do you think that Piastri is going to come in there and shake things up, or do you think it's going to be at least a year of learning? What's your verdict on that?
Well, Black, you see, this is a double-edged sword for Piastri because he's really in a dangerous kind of like situation here. Because bear in mind, if he had just stuck with Alpine or if he had gone to Williams, I think he would have got a bit more grace time, and it wouldn't have basically been a baptism of fire to say. But going straight into the McLaren, this is basically Lewis Hamilton. I sparingly use Lewis in these situations, but I hope the viewers and listeners can get where I'm coming from. this is basically like a Lewis Hamilton type situation of a rookie driver not going into like like a customer team of I know McLaren technically are a customer team, but they're their own thing. It's not Williams, for example. Shout out to Williams and their man there at the back. But like this is McLaren we're talking about. It's a very prestigious team and probably the second most like successful team in F1 history, other than Ferrari. If you look at the entire kind of like time of F1 in its existence, so this is a similar type situation where Oscar's gonna have to come into a podium midfield team. A B, Lando isn't a slouch either, and as much as we get onto him personality wise, because he basically has the personality of soggy biscuits and supermo on a Sunday, you know, in terms of driving a car, other than being able to win a race, he's pretty much shown that he's capable of doing everything else in a Formula One car, which helps. So he's not going to be tough opposition. So yeah, if Oscar doesn't bang, if he gets basically Daniel Ricciardo, to put it like frankly, his career is finished. However, I have hope for Piastri. I think that because he's a much more younger driver than Daniel Ricciardo, he's not developed like bad habits that are like irreversible, or he doesn't have a driving style that it's going to be hard to kind of rebalance or rechange, as we've seen with Daniel this year and in the last couple of years. I think with him too, like he's just a silent assassin. And actually, it's funny that Mark Webber's his manager because I see a lot of resemblances between him and good old Aussie Grit, in terms of like, being the underdog and like actually trying to be a fire starter in the way that Mark Webber was. I even watched something about Mark Webber the other day, and his career, his junior career, even his time at Minardi was crazy. He really achieved a lot of stuff even when he wasn't in the best of cars and even before he became a Red Bull sellout, I say jokingly. So I think Piastri just has that edge, that kind of like fire to him. But after all this controversy all this noise pollution that we've had over the last couple of weeks, I'm not expecting him to beat Lando Norris every single week. I think that's kind of harsh. But at the same time as well, I think he can't afford to get left behind. I think regardless of the fact that he's had a year out from driving any kind of like cars and stuff like that, he's got a lot of development invested into him by Alpine, so you would think that he'd be able to convert that and make it quite fruitful at McLaren, but we'll just have to wait and see.
You know, I feel terrible because Oscar Piastri taking this seat, he clearly took it away from Alex Palou, right? Because he was clearly lined up the next Formula One driver at McLaren. So
Man, I hear
recording.
Alex Palou still like basically trying to run away from Chip Ganassi's bear hug, because
Yeah.
Uncle Chip's got that mean bear hug. If that guy gets you in a headlock, you're finished, absolutely finished. But shout out to Alex Palou as well. On a side note with the IndyCar, like I felt sorry for him because I think he's handled that legal. Basically, in light of the kind of contract madness we've seen in two parallel universes between Formula One and IndyCar, of all the drivers, I actually think it's Alex Palou that's kept his head and just kind of tried to put the performances week in, week out. But unfortunately, at the Portland Grand Prix that we saw at the weekend, his championships, I think, hopes are like mathematically over. So Alex Palou looks like he could be in some serious hot water, considering he's muddied the waters kind of in the team he's at. And on top of that, there's no guaranteed seat for him now in Formula One or, in IndyCar either. So that could be a sticky one. But also just on this topic as well of drivers as well, Black, you kind of teased it, and I think we need to kind of go on to it in a bit more detail as well before we wrap the show up. Gasly, Pierre Gasly, Monsieur Gasly, Gasly. What do you think, man? Do you think he should make the move to Alpine, like basically a works team? French as well, so they've got that je ne sais quoi. I don't even know what that means, but this sounds fancy, so I'm gonna say it anyway. And yeah, just like other than him and Mr. Ocon not really getting on, which again, it's something I think we need to say for another podcast, Black, because I just keep, as much as I actually love Ocon, we keep hearing this consistent thing of him not getting on with
Mm,
teammates. Him and
mm.
Pascal Wehrlein had it out in
Perez.
the Manor days. Then it was the
Mm.
Perez. Oh, the Perez thing was comical, at Spa or in Baku. Then probably because of that, he got kind of dropped for a season and then came back. Then obviously I actually think him and Danny Rick got on quite well, to be fair. So that's kind of the outlier. But then also you've seen like the kind of cracks in the wall between him and Fernando Alonso recently too. And arguably you could say he's the one that partially pushed Fernando out of the team as well with the kind of run of performances he's had this season. So my question to you, Black, is one, do you think that could work? And two, should Red Bull, and I'm gonna say it is in terms of the youth, should
Ugh.
they free up the man them? Should they free up my guy? Free Gasly. Because really and truly, the only thing that's stopping Gasly from going to Alpine other than himself is really Red Bull asking for a big fat paycheck because it puts them in a position now where one, they could just do with the extra money, and two, they gotta basically now promote somebody else from the Red Bull Academy or look elsewhere that might not be as ready. And obviously, same points Alpine race, all the years of development investment they've given to Gasly is no longer gonna pay them any dividends anymore. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think if you're Gasly, you've got to try and get out because if look at AlphaTauri, I can't think of another driver that was kept down. Maybe Kvyat came up, then left the sport, then came, or no, went back down, left the sport, came back, was at AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso as it was for. I think he held the record for the number of appearances in the Toro Rosso or AlphaTauri until Gasly just broke it. So it's kind of being stuck in the reserves. I feel like Gasly's got to take that move if he can make it work. And a Frenchman, French race winner, they're both race winners, I think, in the French team. It makes a lot of sense from a Alpine or Renault HQ perspective. Would it work? Yeah. Gasly's a quick driver, definitely quick in qualifying. Sets the car up for qualifying. Not sure about the race. I was trying to look at the championship while you were sort of asking about Gasly. Last season and maybe the year before, you saw Gasly getting those P5s. Maybe you got the occasional P4, whatever. This season, you have to scroll down and down and down. Gasly's 14th in the championship. He got a P5 in Azerbaijan, but that was a bit of a sort of a freak result. Other than that, in total, he's only had 4 points finishes. And what round are we on? We're like round 14, right? And he's barely retired. He's retired 3 times. So he's barely got more points finishes than retirements. And he sits currently on 18 points. 18 points, you can get that from finishing second. I think Gasly's got to try and move on. If you're now, will he get the move? I don't know. I don't like the idea of having lots of Red Bull drivers placed around the grid. I think again, for me, you should have to sever your tires. Look what happened with Ocon. I think he was forced to sever tires with Mercedes in order to get the Alpine or Renault drivers. It was. For me, I think they should be made to do that. But is Renault ever going to let that happen? Red Bull ever going to let that happen? So yeah, long story short, I'd love it for Gasly. I think it's probably going to happen, but it's probably going to mean that Red Bull have even more influence on the grid, and we'll see yet another annoying Red Bull logo on a driver helmet in a way that particularly doesn't go with the livery. Gasly was just final point. Gasly was probably like in the outside running for if Lewis were to retire, that he might be someone that Mercedes consider. I think going to Renault or Alpine would be make or break. We've seen the Alpine team sort of be the kiss of death for a few careers. So I think I could be wrong, but Magnussen was there for a year. It didn't work out. He went to Haas. And then, the less said about that, the better. He's back now. Palmer.
Oh, good old Julian Palmer.
Yeah. You don't even remember that guy, right? Does he do BBC?
You know what though? Like that's maybe a shout for a future guest, Black, because like I can't lie, like whilst his F1 performance was very short lived, like he's probably one of the most honest pundits I've seen kind of
Yeah.
inside the F1 network. So shout out to Georgino, maybe a future guest. But yeah, I agree with you, like you're right. But then again, McLaren also have that kiss of death too. Look how they completely demolished Stoffel Van Dorn's career. Or
Mm.
they basically killed Nick de Vries's F1 career before he even got started because he was a McLaren junior driver too and won everything and still never got an opportunity. So it's a weird thing with these kind of upper midfield teams, as you mentioned. Like they really can be do or die. But like you rightfully mentioned as well, I think maybe the Mercedes deal, I think that's kind of like I think that's gone. I think, to be fair, I think as hungry as Lewis is, even
Mm.
if it means signing a 1 year extension or something like that until he gets his eighth world championship, I think he'll keep going. So I don't even see
Yeah.
Lewis retiring like as a thing. Like Red Bull again, and until something really happens to Perez, you can't really see any other way that they would promote Gasly back in to Red
Mm.
Bull. And even in today's history, a Red Bull driver has never actually been demoted and then rehired into the actual big brother like team. So there's no guarantee of that. And even if he does get that, what's to say that he won't get the mistreatment he got the first time,
Mm.
when he got absolutely blasted by Max. And at Ferrari, I just don't even know if that's even a feasible option. And bear in mind, despite all the howlers, which we'll get into for the kind of shorter segments we got lined up, just they seem quite comfortable with Leclerc and Sainz right there. And I think until Ferrari sort out their own internal affairs, I don't think it makes any sense changing the light bulbs in that situation because you'll just get the same dim results.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. So Gasly to Alpine makes too much sense. Hopefully it happens. We'll see. And then that might clear the way for your boy Colton Herter uh, with an assist from Stefano Dominicali. So there we are. Listen, Dens, before we crack over to quick predictions for Monza, any also rounds, any ingredients that you almost brought to the pot? Any
Man,
thoughts on things you would have cooked but didn't have time?
well, man, I think as the people asked us to as well, Black, we've got this new kind of thing called moment of the race and
Yeah.
donut of the race. Play on the word donut and actually being a donut and doing donuts. But yeah, for moment of the race, for me, it's not even something that happened in the race. To be honest, for me, I think my moment of the weekend had to be Mick Schumacher actually getting into Q3. I think finally now
Mm.
that they put the blowtorch to him, he's actually kind of like, trying to make sense of his F1 career and, showing why they should give him a chance because he absolutely outperformed Kevin Magnussen the entire weekend. And I know I say this jokingly, but it probably was because of how Lewis got shagged. The only other highlight of the race for me as well, bro, was Stroll getting P10. I think again, like when the chips fall down for Stroll, people are very quick to talk about it. But when he's in the points, so when he's doing what he needs to do, people are very quiet. So I was hoping that people would keep the same energy for him. But then in terms of donut of the day, man, you just have to kind of make it sponsored by Ferrari because it was another catastrophe. How do you pit a car for a pit stop and you only like have three of the four tires ready? How does that make any sense? And then Science himself, his head was hot afterwards when he had that howler of a kind of like thing with the yellow flag overtaking somebody on the yellow flag. And then, man, this he had a messy race as well, man. But who would you nominate as well, for moment of the race and donut of the day or donut of the race?
Yeah, so moment of the race was it's hard to pinpoint, but there was a moment when we all realized that Lewis Hamilton was competing for the win. I
Hmm.
can't pinpoint that moment, but it was like they've got the pace. He's stuck behind Sainz. Sainz comes in. He's still going. Leclerc comes in. Verstappen comes in. Hamilton leads. They're going to do a one-stop. Verstappen doesn't have an answer on the pace, or is only marginally quicker. Like there was a moment around that point. Hamilton was fighting for the lead, and all of a sudden we were transported back to, when Hamilton had a competitive car and not a boat. And for me, that was the moment of the race. Before the very quote unquote suspect Beta Tauri incident, which we've talked about, and then Donkey of the day, or donut of the day, should we say? There's a lot. I mean, look at Ricciardo finishing 17th, a mere 10 points behind his teammate. Did not have an issue with the car. I think there were strategy issues, but you know, if he hadn't already lost his seat for next year, that would be a pretty terrible result, and that puts him on a run of 15th, and then 17th. So,
Whew.
yeah, I think he's up there. The Ferrari point, can't can't say fairer than that. But yeah, I'm going to stick with Ricardo. I'm going to take a lot of flack from our Australian contingent, but yeah, he's not endearing himself to other teams, and that's why we've spent 10 minutes talking about why Gasly is likely to get the Alpine seat and not him. That's my view.
Yeah, fair. And I think as well, Black, good segue into Monza, because we know who won the Monza Grand Prix last year. So somehow Ricardo's gonna have to be doing all kinds of jitter dances, for the next couple of days to hope that he can somehow make Max crash into Lewis without killing him, to somehow win a race, because that's the only way it seems feasible that he would actually win another race in F1 with his current run of form. But again, that's the thing with Formula One. Anybody could win, with the right circumstances and with just how unpredictable the sport is. So yeah, Monza predictions for me, man. I am really really sad to say, and if it wasn't Mercedes, I would happily just for our boy David Noble. Shout out David Noble as well, great gentleman. His episode's gonna be dropping soon as well, guys. So make sure you stay tuned. But just for the Tifosi, if they could leave there with something, they could leave there with like a podium or more importantly a race win. I think that'd be really good for the state of the championship in the way that it's currently standing. But yeah, just Red Bull, low downforce, high speed circuits. I just think it's gonna be a Red Bull washout personally, and I think it's just one of them weeks as well. I think even Perez knows that he's gonna have a decent car that should be able to do the job. So yeah, I really don't have, man. I say this to you, Black. Like I'm actually looking more forward to the IndyCar finale than I am, the race at Monza, because I'm just expecting a Red Bull whitewash, But do you have any contrary thoughts or anything that might give us some sort of hope?
I really wish I did. I mean, a certain team principal last season was disparaging of any, of a particular car that was slower in the corners but faster on the straight. And now, the tables have turned. And this year, that Red Bull, it's just, I don't know, the old Formula One games where you could turn up the difficulty, or, a classic game I used to play was IndyCar by Papyrus. It's like the graphics are so bad that it's an embarrassment. I'll show you it one day. You wouldn't even call it a sim. And you could say, oh, I want the opponents to be on 95% speed or 105%. Honestly, it feels like that Red Bull just on the straight. You've got the difficulty level turned down. So, yeah, all things being equal, they've got that fresh engine. I don't see anyone beating Max Verstappen. They'll probably strap a 10-kilo dumbbell on Perez's car for testing reasons. And so he's not in the fight, And, we could see, not to end this on too much of a damp note, we could see, Vettel's 13 race wins in a season, under threat this year. But let's see. So, and where do I think Mercedes is going to be? I really hope they've got this porpoising sorted, and we'll see, because most of this track is straights. They've obviously been running higher downforce than some of their competitors. You saw in Spa, they were running much higher downforce, and that was quite draggy. I don't know if they would have solved it by then, but we'll see. The car's moving forward, and Lewis seemed really energized at the end of Zandvoort when he really shouldn't have been. So who knows? But yeah, it's Red Bull. It's Red Bull's race to throw away. That's my view.
Yep, I think that's fair, and I think it just is what it is, Black. It's just one of those ones where just like I've never been this deflated or this kind of like Usually we could talk for 3 hours if we wanted to. I know Georgina would kill us, but this time it's just genuinely just because it's just dry. It's just so dry, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, because Red Bull are doing what they have to do whether it's legally, whether it's illegally, I don't know, and I don't want, as I said before, Herman Marco to send the SS around my house. So for that reason, I'm just gonna say allegedly. But you know, to put it on a kind of brighter note, then if F1's not really tickling everyone's fancy, and a final note, because I know Georgina's like scratching her desk furiously for us to end the show. Um, the IndyCar finale, man. So they're at Laguna
Mm,
Seca, one of your favorite circuits, I must add.
mm.
I've got to do maybe I don't know, maybe I've got to do a special video on the stripping the dipping channel at some point
Yes.
this weekend. It'd be cool. But bro, I've got to ask you, man. Who's gonna wrap up? Who's gonna walk away with this championship, man? Because ultimately now it's looking like it could be the old boys, could be Willpower, could be Scott Dixon, it could be one of the young boys, it could be New Garden, which has already actually won it twice, remarkably. I think Scott McLaughlin's got a very outside slim chance, but
Mm.
everybody would have to basically explode. Pato again.
Uh,
He did enough to kind of like have a chance, but still that contact he had with was it Willpower, I think, towards the end of the race
mm.
yesterday, demoted him from third to fourth, wasn't ideal either. Drop points in a place where you really needed to win that race. So who's your money on, man? If you're a betting man, like who do you think is gonna walk away with this title? Because my common sense is just telling me Willpower. The youthful side of me saying Joseph Newgarden for the sheer number of races he's won this season, and still, you know, it's going to the wire. There's part of me that would want McLaughlin to get it just because he's the fairly new kid and, you know, he's kind of the underdog. But then if you're talking about underdogs, Scott Dixon's just like Luther Vandross. He's just creeping. Just guy comes out of nowhere. Guy could qualify 25th place and still manage to be in the top three on the final lap of a race. You could never write him off. And shout out as well to Jim Leo the other day from Pitfit. Great friends as well with Scott Dixon, you know, and gave us some very funny, good behind the scenes kind of stories about Scotty Too Hotty. It's his nickname as well. So what's your prediction there, Black, before we wrap up the show?
Yeah, I think it's Will Powers to lose. He's been so consistent this year. He's only won one race in Detroit, but he's got a lot of fourths, thirds, seconds. He's always there or thereabouts. So the thing I love about IndyCar, and if you're not watching it, you've got to give it a go. Watch the Laguna Seca. Not only have they got the tire strategy, they've got the fuel strategy. So if a safety car comes out at a particular moment, the added jeopardy is that if you pit, then your fuel sort of strategy will be offset because they, in many of these races, they need to stop sort of 5 times, 6 times, even in some of these races. So it's really interesting to watch. But in spite of that uncertainty, Willpower is always there or thereabouts. So I think it's Willpower's to lose. He's got a 20-point advantage. I think they were talking on commentary that the most points you can win in a weekend is 54. That would mean qualifying on pole, leading a lap, leading the most laps, and that would get you to 4 and then winning the race for 50, which tells you that basically to get a 20-point advantage, you've got to have a perfect weekend and then you've got to see a lot of your rivals fall out. So yeah, Power for me is going to do it. McLaughlin is coming on strong, so perhaps he's favourite next season. But it's been an interesting year, and maybe Alexander Rossi isn't in the fight this year, but he's going to come back strong next year. I can feel it. Driving, I think, for Big Daddy Brown in one of the 20 McLarens that will be on the grid. So that's my call. And yeah, we should definitely do another episode or a space or a live or something at some point with IndyCar. It's fantastic entertainment.
Well, I mean, we haven't even formally reached out to them, but because they're very loyal kind of contributors to the cause, you know, we can't kind of not mention, you know, Nia, Molly, and obviously as well Pranusha, which again, they're just amazing and part of our collaborators as well. I think, yeah. Even though it's not official, this is just literally me and Black just like talking like out loud. Whilst Georgina again is furiously scratching her desk as her dog Dookie comes out of nowhere and says, "Feed me." Either way, I want my ice cream. So until I get my ice cream, I prolong this podcast. But yeah, essentially, yeah. I think we have to do a special, yeah, we're gonna have to do a special podcast for the final race. It's just mandatory. So yeah, but Blag, any final words before I wrap this thing up?
No, I'll just say F1 Twitter is not real life. Don't take it too seriously. Fantastic. Like everybody's energy levels picked up when Lewis was in contention. He let out some venom towards the end, and rightly so. He then sort of apologised and was really nicey. I like to see that Lewis when he's, saying it how it is. And the strategy wasn't right, but ultimately, we could take the positives. Lewis was on form this weekend. He was the only Mercedes capable of winning, and it was a fantastic sight to be seen. So more of the same, please. And yeah, more of the same for IndyCar. Let's see how it goes. What about you, Dens? How are you going to spend the rest of the week before we wrap? And then, I'm looking forward to that Indy special.
Yeah, man. This is so. I mean, in a way, even though Formula One's not the most exciting thing to see right now, still, Monza is such a track with such heritage. We had Mario Andretti talk about this, the days of driving, on Monza and kind of how he wanted to drive the banked version, which is still crazy to me. But yeah, the racing can obviously throw up a lot there. So I'm excited. Obviously, as well, you guys have given me some sim racing inspiration to do maybe an IndyCar hot lap around Laguna Seca. So that's gonna be fun. I also feel like I have to do a little cool tribute for our friend David Noble, and I keep teasing that episode because it's coming soon. So, if you're not a Mercedes head, if you just like to know about motorsport, you like someone that knows the F2 and F3 like cast like the back of his hand, make sure you check out the episode. So maybe something along that line too. And then yeah, only other thing I could say, Sir Lewis, just being amazing and saying as it is, but still, trying to be a captain for the team and not be a captain. He is the captain of the team, and carrying, them through thick and thin, and just like trying to do the best he can do, and that's all we can ask. So yeah, that's beautiful to see. And yeah, on a more comical note, hashtag free Gasly, hashtag Betatari, if you got this far into the episode. But guys, until next time, spin your dynamic duo of the MDM, modern day Morgan Freeman, AMG Dens, and the BFB. See, Blag, I've got a cool little nickname for you as well, man. The brilliant F1 Blag as well.
I love it.
I'm glad you do. And I know you all are probably thinking as well, where the hell? You guys said that you guys had like a special guest. Where are they? Don't you worry. We will get them back. We had some technical issues. So yeah, hopefully we'll get them on in a future episode, or they'll have their own episode. But you can't go wrong with an 8 p.m. debrief cookout. No, guys, it's been your dynamic duo. Make sure you stay safe, make sure you take it easy, and until next time, peace. We're out.